Guruve Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadali Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My Dandavat Pranam devotees, a happy New Year's. I had a sort of dear God brother friend of mine write today that every day should be a new year as far as devotion is concerned, because we should see every day as a new chance to advance in bhakti. So I thought that was very well said by him, and I thought I would share it here. But the reason I'm posting a short video today is to speak about another aspect of the psychology of devotion, and that's dealing with trust. Trust is such a integral and important part of the process of bhakti, yet it is one of the most valuable commodities of any individual. Your trust and your giving trust to something or someone is one of the major independent decisions that we make in life. I don't need to use many material examples to illustrate that, because everybody can get an immediate sense of how important trust is. How we trust whom we decide to make life partners with. How we trust where we even invest money. How we trust the nature of where we are, with whom we're there with. Any and everything involves some degree of trust. So devotion is not something different, except that the nature of the investment of trust in the devotional context is required as an absolute investment. In many things within the material paradigm, we can make sort of partial investments or protected investments of our trust, and we always have that option to withdraw. Now, certainly, even in the material paradigm, many people have experienced that they have given trust and have been, emotionally or psychologically damaged from the results of that investment of trust. But still, the idea that I have the ability to control how much of that trust I'm going to give out, and in fact, many people will say, from the experience that I had before, I will no longer invest trust again in that particular ideal, whatever it might have been, a relationship or investment or whatever it might have been. I won't invest my trust there again. The unique thing about the spiritual paradigm and the practice of devotion in particular, the practice of bhakti in particular, is that the requirement for the investment of trust is both absolute and non-compromising. The very nature of the word saranagati is imbued with the import that I have to give my full trust to surrendering my independence to the process of bhakti. Inclusive in that process is surrender to Guru, ultimately surrender to the methodology of practice given by Guru, surrender to the ideal that there is nothing more important or more central in my life than obtaining love of God. So that is a very high prospect, and one we don't normally experience in the material paradigm, because again, even if you've had a breach of trust, you always have the ability to withhold trust going forward. But bhakti doesn't really accommodate that. If you've had a bad experience in bhakti, because again, I always speak about mal-application of bhakti. Bhakti itself is always pure. Bhakti itself is always perfect. And those who are perfect representatives of bhakti are always pure and always perfect. But not everyone is either a perfect representative, and there are situations in which there's just simply the malapplication of the process of bhakti, even when there's good intentions, or sometimes when there's not good intentions. There's the malapplication of bhakti, and the result of that malapplication of bhakti is the impact on the aspirant who had the ideal. Yes, this bhakti is absolutely pure and perfect, now becomes very much challenging, because bhakti does not allow the partial investment of trust or incremental investments of trust. Bhakti is a sort of uncompromising full demand of your trust. This is, again, what is Saranagati. Just like it mentions in the verse describing Saranagati, Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Vivarjanam Rakshishiti Vishwash. So I want to emphasize this word Vishwash. Vishwash means, if you look it up in Sanskrit, it means a trust, a confidence that what I'm doing, I have full faith in that thing. Right? I have full belief, absolute investment of trust that this thing is right. You understand? This is called a Vishwash. It's like a vow. It's like a commitment. Literally, in the word Vishwash is the word swash. One meaning that's given to the word Vishwash is the kind of confidence, emotional investment of trust in something in the same way you have faith and trust in your next breath, because the word swas means breathe. So the same kind of intense trust and faith you have, I'm going to take my next breath. Of course, nobody can guarantee that. But we put faith, yes, I'm going to take the next breath. When you have that kind of faith, that is called Vishwash. Similarly, even in the word, speaking of faith, Shraddha Shabde, Vishwash Kahe. That same word is being used to describe what is faith. By the word faith, Shraddha Shabde, Vishwash Kahe, we mean to say a Vishwash, a complete investment of trust. Shabda Share Vishwash Kahe, Sudrida Nishchoy, Krishna Bhakti Koili Sav Kam Kitoe. That everything that I could aspire for, desire, everything will simply be accomplished by full dedication to the service of Sri Krishna. So trust is an indispensable part of the practice of bhakti. And the reason I bring this up is because once once trust has been breached, once the trust someone has been violated, it is very, very difficult to regroup and reinvest that faith on the same level. And as I explained earlier, in the material paradigm, you can do that. You can say, I will be very mistrusting of, relationships in the future. I'll be very guarded around how much I let somebody gain my trust in terms of relationship, fraternal, conjugal, whatever it might be. Dandavat, Didi, and also Dandavat, Sadhan Siddha Prabhu. So I'll be very guarded around how much I will allow someone to have trust from me. You understand? But in the spiritual paradigm, even when there's been a, quote, breach of trust, the process itself doesn't allow a compromised reinvestment of trust. It is still all or nothing. It is still, yes, I have to give my full dedication. Now that could be being more enlightened. That could be having more introspection about who's representing bhakti. Because remember, the investment of trust is in bhakti. The person who's representing bhakti, that I can vet, I can do introspection. This is why in a guru-disciple relationship, it's recommended in Hari Bhakti Vilas, there should be mutual pariksha. So pariksha means examination. guru to disciple, disciple to guru for 1 year. In many cases, that may not be physically possible or logistically possible, but someone can, have relation with guru via various means, hearing their harikatha, seeing their behavior, observing how they behave, etc., etc. And it can happen like that also. But when we make an investment of trust in the process of bhakti, it has to be absolute. If the trust is not absolute, the reciprocation from bhakti is not full. Because remember, Krishna himself is saying, Yayatam mam prapajante tatam stataiva bhajamyam. According to the nature of the saranagati of an aspirant, Krishna is saying, I'm reciprocating. So if there is doubt, if there is a lack of trust, that lack of trust becomes obfuscation to the reciprocation coming from the process of bhakti. So it becomes extremely important that we understand the value of the property or the commodity we have called trust and faith, because they're synonymous in this case. So in both cases, we should be very mindful of the power invested in those two things. Because when you are dealing with bhakti, again, there's an uncompromising position in that regard. One of the things I observed, which also spawned me to decide to talk about this, was those who have had bad experiences regarding the malapplication of bhakti by individuals, by institutions, whatever it might be. And the inability to regroup, to invest faith again fully in any representative of bhakti, and in some cases in the process itself. Because the psychological or psycho-emotional damage has been so severe that there's a reticence to again take up the same degree of dedication and certainly the same degree of investment of trust and faith. But again, without that, how can bhakti reciprocate? Because it is based on the principle of mutual nourishment. In other words, when you fully surrender, this is why saranagati is not only the doorway to bhakti, but it's actually the first anga of bhakti. The very first anga of bhakti out of the 64 mentioned by Rupa Goswami Pad is Guru Pad Asraya. This means saranagati. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj told, in the 9 processes of bhakti, Shravan, Kirtan, Vishnu Smaran, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandam, Dasya Shaktam, Atma Nivedanam, Iti Pumsa Prita Vishnu. It means, again, saranagati. Pumsa Arpita means to give yourself fully. He's saying then the efficacy of the 9 processes of bhakti can take place. So it's very important that if it is necessary to heal from a particular breach of trust in regards to the malapplication of bhakti, or perhaps to understand something else. I want to tell a little bit of a story here just to give an example. And this is all extemporaneous, so I'm not having really planned to speak on this, but I've just felt a little inspired and I was talking about it. So I'm telling a story. In the early days, when I was in New York, I used to see a pretty crazy phenomenon go on. And that was, there was a whole section of town in the lower part of Manhattan. And you could go on and again, I'm sure it happened in other places in the city, but I used to see it almost as like a regular occurrence in this particular area, where a truck would pull up and they would open the back of the truck, or sometimes a small car, whatever it might be, and they would have all of these boxes that had electrical equipment in it, like stereo equipment or radios or televisions, whatever it might be. And then when cell phones came out, at a certain point were larger ones at that point, and they would all be wrapped up and packaged up, and the person would be giving indication, hey, I got these on a special deal, right? In most cases, people thought they were stolen or something, or I got them out of a warehouse that I work at, or whatever the case might be, and I'm really giving them out at a special deal. So people would, didn't matter what your social status was, a lot of people would go ahead and purchase one, And the person would say, hey, don't open that here because I don't want any problems. So, just when you get home, you can open it, or when you go away from the area right here, you can open it. And that should have been a red flag in the first place. But most people, under so much enthusiasm that they were getting something for nothing or something for less than what it should be valued at, they would take it, walk away, go somewhere else, open it, and they would find it filled with some kind of newspapers or rocks or something else. And I've seen many occasions where the people would come back to that very location furious. And the person would say, hey, I don't know what you did, but what I had in there was what was in there, which was a electrical thing like a stereo phone, whatever they're claiming it was, and you must have did something with it. And because these people were obviously pretty notorious, people wouldn't want to get into a physical altercation about it, even though they were extremely angry. You understand? But I'm bringing this story up to bring up a point. Sometimes there is a reason behind running into a situation in which, and this is not an excuse for violating trust, but in the larger karmic picture of things, there sometimes is a reason why a certain degree of the test, I'll call it, of our faith and trust comes about. If we came to the process with an ulterior motive to perhaps get something at less than the actual value of the thing, in this case we're talking about bhakti, many times Krishna himself will set up an arrangement by which your faith and trust will be tested in order to see if you're really willing to pay the actual value, which is your entire existence, or whether you were simply trying to glean happiness from spiritual pursuit. You understand? Because the nature of being self-interested for our own happiness is not an easy thing to do away with. So, though we may have tried it so diligently in the material world and were unsuccessful, a lot of times people will turn to spiritual practice simply as a way to have the same self-interest, but now using the spiritual paradigm. That's all. It's not really their self-interest has changed, they just now are geared towards the spiritual paradigm. And they're trying to use the energy of the spiritual paradigm to fulfill their happiness. You understand? So because really, the nature of happiness in bhakti is not a byproduct of wanting our happiness. The very nature of happiness in bhakti is a byproduct of exclusively wanting Krishna's happiness. This is the very definition. Anya abhilasita sunya. To be completely void of any other desire except anukulyena Krishna anusilanam. All of my endeavors will be for Krishna's anukul. Anukul has special meaning here, but we'll generically call it happiness of Krishna. But really, that's not the full meaning. Anukul here has a really specific meaning. But the point being, full interest only in the pleasure of Krishna and having no self-interest in my own pleasure. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's also mentioned there. Atma sukhe duke gopiyo na kare vichar. The hallmark quality of the reason the gopis are so glorified for their love for Krishna is because Atma sukhe duke na kare vichar. They never took any vichar, means consideration, of Atma sukha dukh, their own happiness or distress. Everything they did was simply for the satisfaction of Krishna. The very last verse of Gopi Geet, Yatesu Jata Charanam Burunam Staneshu. This verse epitomizes that mood. That their love for Krishna was so deep that they considered that the very thing that would make Krishna happy could cause him pain. So I don't want to go into detail here, but in Ujjalina Mani, this is a certain level of what is called Rudhabhav. Means a very high class of praying. In which Kina Tatsuke Atra Sankaya, in which a doubt comes. Even though I know I'm pleasing Krishna, am I actually pleasing him? So this doubt arises due to the extreme nature of love. In Ruda Mahabhav. You understand? So the gopis reciting this verse recited it in that mood. You understand? My point here being, they have no self-interest whatsoever. They have so much interest in Krishna's happiness, they consider in the bewilderment of that love that though I'm making Krishna happy, I might not be making him happy. You understand? So this kind of deep mood certainly requires, even at the outset, the kind of at least investment of full trust and faith in the process of bhakti and the giving up of our own self-interest. So it's very difficult if there was some violation of trust, and now we have to reinvest that trust fully with no compromise. We can't say, well, I'm going to just be more measured in how I give that trust now. In bhakti, that can't happen. You have to give full trust. So I was pointing that out to point out that sometimes we come to the process with self-interest. And in coming to the process with self-interest, we run across a situation arranged by Bhakti Devi herself in order to check that self-interest and measure the degree to which we are coming to bhakti for the true interest of exclusive anukul seva or exclusive pleasurable seva to Krishna versus our own interest. And that's a very difficult pill to swallow. That somehow or another, that I have to take a look at my participation in something I was the victim of. That's a very difficult pill to swallow. And in material situations, we tend to completely avoid that. As you know, many of you obviously know, I've worked in law enforcement as a career. And when you're dealing with a victim, even if that person went to a very dark place at a very inappropriate time, and it's a known place to be dangerous, you can't remind them of that if they were the victim of a crime in that place. It just would be inappropriate, right? That may be a true factor, but still you can't remind them of that. But in the process of bhakti, even if we try to be prudent in how we assess and deal with situations of people who've been, their trust has been violated, you understand? That is still a factor. We may not want to bring it up because I don't think it would be helpful in the psycho-emotional state of someone who's had a violation of trust to bring that up. But the karmic reality in the bigger picture can't be ignored. It's mentioned, Tate anukampam sushamikshimano bhunjam eva atmakritam vipakam. Atmakrit means there was something there, something on my part, which created a particular situation, even in the process of bhakti. So that is very, very difficult to digest, but until some maturation comes, until some healing is there, it may be difficult to digest that, but part of healing will be ultimately to come also into that sensibility. Yes, atmakritam vipakam. There was some lesson here for me. Krishna's love is perfect, and it was trying to teach me something. And then it may renew, actually, the inspiration to give full faith investment. It doesn't mean you'll do it without prudence, but certainly your preparation is, I want to give again full investment, full faith, full trust to the process of bhakti. Now, I might be more prudent about examining the representation of that bhakti. And there's no harm in that. That's not a sign of distrust. Prudence is not a sign of distrust. So I may not just, okay, like there was a situation, obviously, where there were breaches of trust in regard to guru-disciple relationships in an institution or something. And then, by institutional regulation, the recommendation was, okay, just take from another person within the institution, right? You don't get your ability to take a broader examination of sadhus and actually get inspiration and therefore pick up from your relationship with a broader range of sadhus, unrestricted by institutional boundary, to really become inspired with whom you'll again invest your full trust. So what's being asked is that, listen, invest in the institution. Your personal sense of guarding your trust to find the perfect representation of bhakti is not as important as following the institutional guidelines. That's problematic. And actually many young devotees have brought this up now, that they've decided not to even seek again, having their trust violated once, not to even seek out again receiving Harinam or Diksha and moving forward in the process. Understand? Because the combination of the institutional arrangement and the particular inability to completely heal, because if the institutional dynamic has not really changed, you can't have a great degree of trust or faith that the same thing will not happen. You understand? And I'm not talking about situations where there may have been some bewilderment, which could happen to someone who has not yet obtained siddhi, and they're unfolding. But they may meet the standard. Sastra yukti suni punya jura sharayandra uttamadikari se tare sansar. They've understood Sastra. Sastra yukti means all of the application and logic of Sastra. Their faith is fixed in the process, but they've not realized their siddhi yet, and therefore the haunting of some previous material impression may come. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when the breach of trust becomes an overt violation or disregard for the principles of Bhakti altogether, and some things even leading to like predatory behavior with disciples or others or anything like that. That's something else. That's something else. And it becomes very difficult to regroup trust from that. So part of the healing will also be how the environment is made available to those persons. If the environment is simply the status quo, the same ideals, situations, and under which their trust was violated, you can't expect a regeneration of trust and investment of that trust. So, but if exposure to the wider range of sadhus is made available, and a person is able to go, and they can hear Harikatha here, they can see the behavior of the sadhu here, they can spend time developing a relationship here, they'll have trust that now I am in a position to give my trust freely, not under constraint, to give my trust freely based on true inspiration. Even in the early days of our society, our institution, there was kind of an ideal at first, just take initiation from who's ever nearby, right? That was the kind of zonal acharya idea, whatever. Of course, they saw the failings of that, and then it morphed into, just whoever you're inspired by, but still staying in the walls of the institution. And what that did really was kind of restrict access to elder sadhus in many cases who were actually siddhas, who had actually obtained siddhi. We kind of romanticized the idea based on the vision of our Srila Prabhupada that anybody who occupied the space after that had the same quality, just with some, maybe with some difference. It was like that kind of vision. Yes, Guru means they're pure devotees, siddha, etc., what have you. And obviously a crisis of faith develops when that turns out not to be the fact. And that generated a lot of animosity, criticism, so many different things. But if we had remained open to the dynamics of elder sadhus who actually were siddha, our Srila Prabhupada gave recommendation. You should ask questions to Srila Bhakti Rakshak Shri Maharaj. Acknowledge siddha. To my own Guru Parapadma, Srila Bhakti Narayan Maharaj, that he should also help to disciples. He's obviously siddha. You understand? So, and many others. There were many. But the point being, it would make, even after the aftermath of the possible crises of faith that evolved from certain situations, it would have renewed faith. Okay, then within the nature of bhakti, not recommending go to Mayavadis or anything else, but in the Mandala Vaishnavas, hear different Harikatha. Have some association, even if you need to go to India, whatever it might be, have association. if you're inspired, and now the nature of your ability to again, which is the actual process of bhakti, wholeheartedly give your faith imbued with trust to that person, you could still operate in service within the society, only now you're inspired. But to now put, especially in the younger generation, a situation in which people are so uninspired that they have no ability to develop enough trust to again invest in sadhu. And without that, how can you advance in bhakti? If you have no faith in sadhu, yasya devi parabhakti yata devi tatha guru, has to be implicit faith in Bhagavan and implicit faith in a similar way in Guru. Guru here always doesn't have to mean Harinam Diksha Guru. Even in the persona of Shiksha Guru, in the persona of Bhatma Padaksha Guru, that those you may see on the path, you've not taken Harinam Diksha, but you see them on the path, and you have inspiration from seeing and hearing their Harikatha, seeing their behavior, etc. You have inspiration. So many of the young devotees, I'm not mentioning by name, but I've visited many sanghas that are championed and organized by younger devotees who have this vision now. We have to be available to the broader Vaishnava Sangha and let people take true inspiration. And as a collective, we are serving the overall mission of Mahaprabhu, which is not different from the mission of Srila Prabhupada or this Mat or that Sangha. We're serving that mission. But the genuine inspiration coming from true connections to sadhus is the motivating energy that's making that happen. But right now, dedication to an institution will never provide the same kind of enthusiasm. Nobody can tell me that the level of enthusiasm that was experienced by those, because I had darshan of our Srila Prabhupada. I joined at a time of the presence of our Srila Prabhupada. I saw what kind of enthusiasm came. In 1975, I was in Los Angeles when the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita pretty much was just like in a marathon way produced. You understand? And I saw the enthusiasm of devotees. Any new book that would come out, Srimad Bhagavatam, anything, you'll find them in the middle of the street there on Watseka Boulevard, all trying to get a glimpse of that book. 400 devotees at a time going on Harinam. So that kind of enthusiasm was because of trust, faith, investment in a sadhu. The institution was not the source of the inspiration, it was the sadhu. The institution was simply the organizing mechanism for that inspiration of the sadhu to be done in a collective way. To carry out services in a collective way. So this becomes a very important point, and I thought about it because, one, I've spoken to some young people, and they've mentioned this, right, that, they've felt like their trust was violated, and they don't feel they could find, again, any kind of trust in the institution. Also from that has been kind of the either gross or subtle Ritvik Vad, I'll just take shelter of Srila Prabhupada. But that's not our system. Our system is that we take shelter of Parampara. And the Parampara is very clearly explained in Adi Leela, chapter 1, I think it's text 58. Jive Sakshat Nai Chaitya Guru Rupe is the shlok. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that the spiritual mentor appears before the external senses of the fortunate conditioned jiva soul. Because Srila Prabhupada, he is in the position when the Acharya enters Samadhi, it is called Antradasha. Antradasha means they've entered into a position in which they are featured in their Siddha Roop. You understand? In their Siddha Roop, they are fully engaged now in Nitya Lila Seva. Therefore, it becomes important for the Mahant. Actually, in that verse I just quoted, Jive Sakshat Nai Chaitya Guru Rupe, Sri Krishna Hoy Mahant Swarupe. Krishna appears as the Mahant. Mahant means literally a person who appears before the external features of an aspiring devotee to give guidance. So the ability to again invest faith in the parampara, meaning the current Vahant, sadhu, which may be in any given situation, right? In the verse, Brahmanda Brahmati Kon Bhagwan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Poi Bhakti Lara Bij. No institution, location, or anything is mentioned there. Brahmanda Brahmati, wandering throughout the entire Brahmandas, right? Let's be realistic though, within our world here, right? We may come across Guru Sadhu in which we are completely inspired and we can invest our faith there. You understand? And then this gives rise to the ability from the full investment of faith to get the full reciprocation of the process of bhakti. Saranagati is the first anga of bhakti. And Saranagati is the entrance into the ideal of Anya Abhilasita Sunya. No other desire except Krishnanukul Seva. So it means the full investment of your trust in everything else. That I only want Krishna's. But if I have to be guarded around my faith, how can I trust, okay, what's going on? I'm not sure what's going to happen here today. How can your bhajan give reciprocation? So we'll be going through the process, but it'll be niyamagraha. Niyamagraha means ritualistic. All right, I believe Krishna is God. I get the intellectual prospect that I'm his servant, but I've got to protect myself. But in Saranagati, what is it saying? Anukuyasya sankalpa pratikuyasya vivajanam rakshishiti vishwas, avishwas. Right, I already described what vishwas means. Rakshishiti, goptavevananam tata, that Krishna is my protector and maintainer. So if I don't see that in the representation, how can I give full faith, full investment? How can I do Saranagati? Again, Prahlad Maharaj's verses, Iti pumsa aprita Vishnu, bhaktasya navalakshan. Pumsa arpita means the person. Mind, body, heart, everything given at the lotus feet of Bhakti Devi in the form of Guru Parampara. Yeah? So I thought this topic, just to talk about it for contemplation purposes and to give some serious thought to it, especially to encourage our younger generation to heal if necessary, but then to regroup and with prudence, again reinvest faith in a sadhu. Because without the investment of faith in a sadhu, in parampara, then the flow of bhakti does not come. And therefore your practice will start to turn into niyamagraha, and because niyamagraha is a ritualistic format, it will not give the necessary emotional reciprocation we're looking for. So what we'll do is we'll start to extract emotional reciprocation from material input into bhakti. What do I mean by that? Bhakti will become a socio-religious function for us. Prabhu, are you going to the Kirtan Mela? Right? The essential thing seems to be headed by, we're all going to come together and do Harinam. But the real bottom line is, we'll come together, I got friends, I got food, prasadam, good music, the best music, Kirtan. And I'll see, other friends and we'll interact and so forth and so on. And it becomes a sense of enjoyment as bhakti. Right? Especially when you go to a Kirtan Mela, nobody says, well, let's examine whose devotional quality is the highest and let them lead the Kirtan. People go because they want to hear the sweetness of the rag and tal of the best singers and musicians. You understand? So the basis becomes the enjoyment of rag and tal. This is not altogether negative, so don't misinterpret what I'm saying. You understand? Because there's always Sukriti fal involved in the holy name. Always. But the deep reciprocation with Nam can't take place unless there is Iti Pumsa Arpita Vishnu or Saranagati. And you have to find that person in whom I can become fully Saranagati. From that person, learn the science of bhajan. In learning the science of bhajan, the Kriya Shakti of Bhagavan, that's why it's called Bhajana Kriya. The Kriya Shakti of Bhagavan will descend. and illuminate my consciousness. And as my consciousness becomes illuminated with Bhakti Shakti, the incremental stages from Shraddha to Sadhusanga, Bhajana Kriya, Anarthas will be removed, Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, and finally Bhav will descend. And this is our goal. Kriti Sajja, Bhavat Sajja, Bhavasa Sadhanabhida, Nitya Sirasa Bhavasa, Prakritam Riddhi Sajjita, to manifest the Nitya Siddha Bhav. This is the purpose of practicing bhakti. Okay? So trust is a foundational feature of that. So I wanted to speak this, even though it went longer than I wanted, to elucidate this point, to have it raised perhaps in a larger arena about how to reinvigorate trust. Because even now, there are situations where people doubt bhakti, doubt Srila Prabhupada, doubt the whole process, but at the same time, due to intellectual facility, they can't deny the idea Krishna is God, and bhakti is a bona fide process or something, but they have many, due to mistrust and from the malapplication of bhakti, they have many different doubts and various things related to the practice. Understand? And obviously, no true reciprocation of bhakti can come in that arena. Right? Alright, my Dandavat Pranam devotees. Banchakalpaturvesha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanevya Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.